largest and fastest growing union of direct care nurses. She has extensive union and political experience, having been a city legislative aide, San Francisco Labor Council political director, FLCIO political campaign director, and union organizer and trainer. Work has often included community and labor coalition building and contributed to the legislation providing San Franciscans with living wages, municipal ID cards for residents regardless of immigration status, and health care for the uninsured.
Good morning. So it's so interesting to see the comparisons of Wisconsin and Egypt. My name is Pilar Schiavo. I work for National Nurses United, and I've actually been working in Wisconsin for almost 4 months. And so we have members in Wisconsin who are represented by our affiliates. We have Minnesota and Michigan Nurses Association. And when the revolution of Wisconsin happened, our nurses responded, our staff responded, and they asked for national help, and so we came in and helped as well. And I just want to kind of, unfortunately I didn't bring pictures, I really should have, I'm so sorry, but I know people have seen a lot of them. But I just want to kind of paint a little picture of what Wisconsin has been like, and I know everyone was really inspired by it, and it's ironic that all of this came to pass on February 11th, which is also the day that Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, introduced his budget and his collective bargaining attack as well. And so, this response, there were a lot of, especially initially, a lot of connections to Egypt and dictatorship, and reflected in the signs and the messages in Wisconsin too. And if folks haven't been to Wisconsin or aren't familiar with Wisconsin, Wisconsin culture is very much Midwestern nice, right? That people are so nice there, it's amazing. And so, I would always tell people, it's the nicest group of protesters I've ever met in my life. Because we went, so things kind of ramped up there, fighting against the attacks on collective bargaining, but the budget is devastating. The budget is going after taking away health care. They have an excellent public health care system, taking that away, gutting the schools and giving vouchers to rich families, no income limits, just take your money out of the public schools and go to some, private school and take your money. Getting rid of Planned Parenthood, where a lot of the poor, as you know, get their health care, privatizing the University of Wisconsin system, selling off their public utilities to private corporations. I mean, it is the corporate dream, this budget in Wisconsin, is exactly what's happening. This agenda that they've been working on for 30 years, they wrote it themselves, and that's what's happening in Wisconsin, and that's what's happening, as we know, in a lot of states around this country, right? So, so we got on the ground, and one of the things, this really was a revolution of the people in a lot of ways. That, the people were, the rank and file union leaders, community people were out there who were not affiliated with unions, out ahead of their leadership. And so the leadership was kind of struggling to catch up, right? And so you would talk to people who were just like, they didn't get a call from an organizer or a labor rep, they just talked to some coworkers and they all decided they should go to the Capitol and protest. And so this is kind of how the movement started, and unions started organizing and responding to, and building that, and it couldn't have been built without the unions. But there was, just to kind of paint a picture, solidarity in the truest sense of the word was in Wisconsin. I mean, you could feel it, people were just connected and supporting each other, and it was amazing. It makes me tear up. So, there were all these really amazing kind of pieces of what was going on, and people, to give you a sense of kind of a day in Wisconsin, it would start, I would open up my curtain because I was staying next to the Capitol, and I would be like, okay, there's people protesting, it's like 18 degrees outside, right? If there's people out there protesting, we're doing good. And so I'd open my curtain and there'd be, you know, a couple scattered people walking around the Capitol with their signs, right? Handmade signs with these amazing, you know, I'm waiting to be trickled down on or whatever. They have great humor in their signs there too. And so it would build throughout the day. The firefighters at noon would lead a march, there'd be a rally, there was open mics kind of all day, anyone who wanted to come participate. They'd been occupying the Capitol for weeks. And then, you know, and then at the end of the day they would have a 5 o'clock rally, and this was every day for weeks this was going on. There was kind of mass movement, mass protest every single day. And then huge protests on the weekends. That built from 5,000 to 180,000 people, right? Just amazing response. So, you know, we got there, we decided we were going to do a no cuts, no concessions march, kind of a Mardi Gras themed march, and we started talking about it on Monday. I got there on Tuesday, the march was on Thursday, and we had 7,000 people show up to this march, planned in 2 days. So this is the kind of like amazing just activism that's happening, right? And part of it I think had to do with our message, right? That there was all this talk of shared sacrifice from both the Republicans and from the AFL-CIO that people were rejecting. And so a message of no cuts and no concessions I think really resonated with people. So then let's go to the passage of the budget, the legal vote, the budget passes, and some of the mistakes of the movement. So at that point, they cleared out the leaders in the movement, not me, but but leaders in the movement actually cleared out the Capitol. Unions being very afraid of what the reality of these laws were going to be went into immediate negotiations to try to settle contracts in 24 and 48 hours. Because the law basically meant that if you have an expiring contract, your contract's basically done. And then it also meant that the only thing that you can bargain over if you have a contract is wages. So no working conditions, no other protections, just wages, which guts the power of the union, right? And you have to re-verify every year, even if you have a contract. So unions were really trying to get a contract in place to give them additional protections. But, you know, they came back, they ended up going to city councils and school boards who supposedly were supporting them in this fight, right? Businesses had signs all over, there's all this public support for this fight. But they still asked for the same concessions that the governor was asking for. And so they came back to memberships with a lot of these same concessions. And even in the height of this amazing movement, right, where people were ready to fight, their eyes were wide open to what this economy is really about, that unions were negotiating these contracts with concessions, with the same kind of concessions that the governor was asking for. So there was this pivotal moment at that point where, you know, people converged on the Capitol the night that the vote happened. They were chanting general strike in the Capitol. You know, it was this moment where it could have gone one way or another. And I really believe, I mean, the teachers union was one of the strongest, the firefighters of the teachers union, really, Madison teachers, were the strongest leaders out of all the unions in this movement. And, you know, if one of those unions had called for a strike or gone on strike, I really believe it could have been the spark that really meant, like, mass strikes in Wisconsin and, you know, and taking the revolution to the next level. But that didn't happen. They too negotiated, well, not the firefighters, but the teachers also negotiated these contracts where they took concessions on health care and pensions, like all the other public sector unions did, AFSCME and the others as well. So it ended up being a real demobilizing moment. And at the same time, they didn't have a day after plan, right? We knew this vote was going to happen one of these days. And there wasn't a real plan for the day after. So what happened then is everyone went into these meetings. It's so funny because I've heard a lot about what's happening in Egypt right now, meetings about figuring out what kind of political system they want, how they're, you know, what their platforms are, all of these things. And that was happening in Wisconsin because there was this real leadership vacuum where the only message coming from the state AFL-CIO and the national too was about shared sacrifice, you know, making decisions based on polling and where the people are at, instead of, you know, seeing the hundreds of thousands of people at the Capitol and deciding that's a pretty good poll. So, you know, maybe we should go with them. But, you know, so these are the kinds of arguments that I've had with leadership, right? That, oh, people aren't there. Well, I think there was a real disconnect of realizing that the role of leadership is to lead, you know, to get people there, too. Right? So, you know, I think one of the lessons learned that is really, and I have to wrap up, so sorry, but we have a workshop later if we want to talk about it, is really that, you know, another problem was that there's a loss of the culture of organizing. And so not only was it a conscious choice not to lead, to escalate, to fight, to build a real movement to win, but it also wasn't, it's almost outside of their consciousness, right? People have not organized for so long, they don't even know where to start. And so it's a real problem. You know, it's a real problem in our movement right now, that people have gotten out of the habit of organizing, that they rely on contracts and arbitration and grievances and negotiations instead of building a movement, building, you know, activism, and building real power. And so, you know, this is kind of at the crux of what is the biggest issue there. And so here people are ready to act, right? Ready to fight, willing to stand up like they never ever have before. You talk to all these people who are like, I've never been to a protest. And they've been out there for 2 weeks, every day, you know? So here at this moment where people are ready to act, that, you know, this is the moment where we need to take it to the next level. You know, I think one more point and then I'll wrap up. Another point is that, you know, I think there's a loss of belief that we can win. You know, that they don't even wage a fight to win anymore because they don't think we can. And that's a real problem. And so it was just like, the strategy was, well, let's just keep people angry enough so we can get to recalls, which was really demobilizing and still putting your faith in politicians and not holding them accountable, right? And so, you know, it's really time, and one of the things that we're doing nationally is the contract for, the Main Street Contract for America, which really is about putting forward our own agenda, fighting for our own agenda, getting off of their agenda. We're not going to just concede and minimize damage anymore, that we need to put forward our own agenda and talk about, you know, living wage jobs, healthcare for all, expanding education in this time where people are suffering, you know, talking about where we should be going as a nation and getting away from this corporate agenda, and people's eyes are wide open to that right now. So I think one of the inspiring things coming out of this, even though we had a loss yesterday with the vote, or Thursday with the vote and the passage of this budget, is that people are ready to fight. People's eyes are wide open about what's really going on. This has really, really crystallized the corporate agenda being forced down our throats, right? And that people are ready to stand up and fight and put forward our own agenda, and they get what's right and what's wrong. And so I think, you know, this is a turning point for us, and we need to keep it going and capitalize on this and organize and fight to win. Thank you.